I'll be sharing with you about a mindset for problem solving, how you can be motivated by the spirit of problem solving and then make use of the career that you choose. In your case, mostly engineering careers. It is all about solving problems as engineers or as entrepreneurs or as innovators. So being the force of change, but with the spirit of empathy and problem solving. So while I'm from a very different part of the world, very little common in your world and my world, you all are mostly from the hot plains of India. I'm in the cold deserts at 4,000 meters, the roof of the world. You all deal mostly with digital world, and I here do something with real world. Mostly there I hear of artificial intelligence, but I also work with some natural intelligence here. But with all these differences, the spirit of solving problems and creativity and being a force of change is something common between us. So I'll share from my story of how I used various things that I learned through my life and through my educational career, mainly engineering, which is something else that is common between us, perhaps, to solve problems, and not just solve engineering problems, technological problems. I think engineering education gives us that analytical mind and creative thinking that can be used for all kinds of problem solving. So you can engineer social solutions, you can engineer environmental solutions, you can engineer educational solutions. So solutions can be various, but the spirit of engineering is about solving these problems. Now, I'll maybe take you through some images because the world I come from is very different from yours, and it will take some images, as they say, to speak more than my 1,000 words. So let's go about where I am and what it means. So this is Ladakh. Ladakh in the top north of our country, flanked by somewhat unfriendly countries like China on the east and Pakistan on the west. Most of the wars that India fought were in these mountains, almost all of them actually, except Bangladesh and Pakistan's war. Most other wars were fought here. It's a desert in the mountains. It's a desert across the Himalayas. So I'll start again. I'm sorry about it, but there's not so much we can do about it except look forward and do what we can of the rest of the time. Hi. So I was just talking about Ladakh and how extreme it is. Well, now digitally also you can add to that, but I was saying thermally with plus 35 to minus 35 and hardly any rains. It looks like a moonland, and often called moonland. You can see how for somebody coming by air, it looks like the moon. But then there is a difference between the moon and Ladakh. The difference is that little green patch, the oasis, that is all human contribution to enriching nature. So this is a typical Ladakhi village, which our forefathers carved out of sheer rocks and created green oases using nothing but glacial meltwaters. We don't get hardly any rains. 4 inches of rains is what you get in a whole year. That's not enough. So they were very innovative. They carved out canals and brought fossilized water from hundreds and thousands of years old, which is called glacial melt, and created these green patches with barley, wheat, peas, and fruits like apples, apricots, pears, grapes, even. Yeah, engineering of their time. Now, it is a reality, what you're seeing in Ladakh: extreme temperatures, cold, and you can see what circus people have to go through to just run a simple tap, heating them because the pipes block with frozen water and burst open often. So we are a minority in the mountains, not just ethnic or linguistic, but also technological minority. Because what works in Delhi or Mumbai doesn't work up here if the same technology is used. So we have to innovate and invent technologies for Ladakh. It's not that it is impossible, but we have to engineer ways of doing things in the cold mountains. We cannot use what is done in what works in Delhi. Well, by the way, half the time taps don't even work in Delhi, so you can't expect much from Ladakh. I hope you are with me and can share a bit of the humor. Minorities, we are not just technologically, but yes, linguistically and ethnically. But in these mountains, people have lived, and more than lived, actually thrived with a colorful civilization with its own culture, dances, music, language, literature, and so on. So we have always been landlocked. This is a place where even today, 6 months, half the year, there's no connectivity, and only the summer months are when we are connected to the rest of the world. So challenges and problems are many. Shivering cold winters with -30, you can imagine. No water in a desert, high and dry is what nature has left us, as the English proverb goes. And being a minority is not just about language and dresses and culture, but it affects things in life. So we in the mountains have a totally different life and a different world, and yet when Ladakh opened to the rest of the world in the 1960s, the schools that came to educate our children were very little relevant to the place. So they would come with textbooks that we couldn't make any sense of, language that people didn't understand, teachers who didn't speak to us in the language. And I saw, when I came across this situation, that there were high failures in Ladakh. 95% were failing in their exams. Yes, this was the reality repeatedly. So I came face to face while doing my engineering. I had to teach. I had to teach children to support my own engineering. Actually, my ambition was just to support financially, and I used to do coaching and teaching. But then I got to see what our children were going through, failing en masse. And when I taught them, they were so bright. They could understand all the complicated concepts very easily, yet because of a language that was not contextual, examples, textbooks, all not contextual to this cold desert. You can imagine, textbooks that say F for fan in a place that is -30 and children are shivering. The teacher explains F for fan. And when children ask, what is this? He says, this is supposed to keep people cool. Cool when you are shivering in -30. So of course they didn't make sense. So this is just an example of how irrelevant they were, and therefore no wonder the results were so bad in schools. So this moved me very much. Actually, engineering, I told you, is about solving problems. And solving problems starts with a sense of empathy. Empathy is the most important ingredient in solving problems, not your geometry or not your calculus, not your spanners and tools and computers, but really the most important ingredient in solving problems and being a force of change is empathy for what's happening around you. And that can be technological solutions or social solutions. So I was moved by this educational situation and I started engineering a solution for this. So rather than blaming the products or the teachers, I started analyzing to find the root causes of this failure. And no wonder very soon we found that it's the language, alien language like Urdu or English taught to children who only spoke Ladakhi, in textbooks that made no sense with F for fan. So very soon we started solving the problem. This is after I came out of my engineering and came back to Ladakh to solve these problems. I decided not to join friends who were leaving for California or Bangalore or Mumbai. I was possessed to solve the challenges that my place had. So we started remaking all the textbooks. If textbooks don't work, we change them. They don't come down from heavens. So you have to have a spirit of can do, will do, and whatever it takes. Whatever it takes is what I call the spirit. So if the textbooks are not working, change them. We started changing all primary school textbooks. Teachers were not well trained, train them. We started training them to be child-friendly, hands-on, experiential learning, and so on, and organize the people using volunteers and working with the government, because we were working in government schools, which is where all this was happening. And majority of the people in our country send their children to government schools. And until they change and they improve, India does not stand much chance. It's not possible with a handful of private schools, shining bright, if you have the most of our schools in dust. So we started working with government schools. And, when you do something, you start seeing change also. So while the results were like bare minimum 5% pass for years and years, after these interventions, things started changing, and slowly results went from 5 to 7 to 23, 36, and finally 75%. So this meant that there was nothing wrong with students, just that system was against them, everything. So we started changing those. And you can see that still 25% were failing. 75% is better than 5%, but still, why should 25% fail? No one really is a failure, we thought. If they can't learn the way we teach, then we better teach the way they learn. So again, whatever it takes is the spirit. So we started now focusing on how to help these so-called repeated failures. And we believed that there was nothing wrong with them. They were actually very sharp, bright kids. Sometimes they were too honest to cheat and therefore failed. Sometimes they were too different and therefore failed. So we said, now that normal schools are better, we better take on those who are really rejected by all systems and make them into leaders. Don't just solve the problem, but more than solve the problem, make it into an opportunity. And that's what it takes to have a, problem solving attitude. So in 94, some of us went to an empty desert with a bunch of failures, so-called failures. There was nothing wrong with them. Some 20 students who had failed even in this newer system. And in the middle of nowhere on this desert, we started a different concept of learning. Our thinking was that if they can't sit in classrooms and listen to lectures and learn, then we better create a way where they learn by doing. Many of us, actually most of us, are wired by evolution to learn by doing and not by listening to lectures and scribbling notes and reading papers. So we said, let's design a school that is conceived and designed by the students, built by the students, and run by the students. And in doing so, they should learn. Learning should happen in application of the learnings. And in the next 5 years, we created a school that was very, very unique. First of all, that it was a school where the admission criteria was not distinction and positions and ranks and marks, but that you have failed in the system. So it was for those who had failed in the system. And the students had designed, together with, of course, grown-ups, designed and built this school, which was way ahead of its times. Back then, you can see that it was powered fully by the sun. So even in -30 winters of Ladakh, they could sustain warmly through the winters without using any other fuels, fossil fuels, heatings, only with the sun's energy. And for that, you would use all the geography you would learn in schools with how the sun moves in the winter southern hemisphere of the northern hemisphere of the earth, how the sun moves in winter, how the sun moves in summer, not just writing that in exams, but using that to design a school and building the school to use maximum solar energy. So the heating was all solar, power was all solar. In fact, this was a fully solar powered, off grid, zero energy campus, terms that were not even invented back then, and created by a bunch of failures. Now, the buildings were built by the students who would learn skills of building, dignity of labor, and geometry and engineering while making it happen. And once the school was built, it was actually run by the students. It still is run by the students, like a little country with a little elected government, with their own little parliament. This gives them the life skills of taking responsibility, being accountable, and they actually run the school with some guidance from the grown-ups. But basically, this school is run like a little country by the students, with a parliament that has elections every 2 months, and different set of students get portfolios or responsibilities to run, and they can be anything from maintaining and installing solar power plants, solar cooking devices, gardens with vegetables, cows that give the milk, but then always connected to the textbooks which teach you, various theories are put into application. For example, the ones growing organic gardens would sell their products to the campus kitchen at a selling price and work backwards to find the cost price of the vegetables, and then practically learn that profit is equal to selling price minus cost price, hands on. Similarly, all the systems on this campus are actually run by the sun, from lighting in the day to greenhouses that produce vegetables in winter to cooking with solar devices, electricity, water heating, pumping. Even the cows on this campus live in solar heated cowsheds. So all engineered. Solar is not a mantra. I mean, some places that you come from may not have much sunshine. What I'm trying to say is use local resources. Local for us is like 300 days of sunshine. So why not use that? Why curse that we don't have oil under our ground and trees and wood on the mountains? Why not use what you have? And sun is what we have, so we put sun to use. Similarly, how do you build the buildings and how do you heat the buildings? I'll share with you a little bit. Innovation, using what you learn in schools, or in your cases, in your engineering college, they are as good as the use that you make of them. So playing with earth, sun, ice, and fire, we call it. So earth, soil, Earth is often a word used for soil, that you have free, abundant under your feet. You can use that to build your buildings. You don't have to buy cement and concrete for so much money, need a budget, and so on. You just dig up and use that to build the houses, and then you use sun to heat that house. Both of these are free beautifully. If you are open to what you find around surrounding you, you find abundance of soil or earth under your feet. For rich and poor, it's free, very democratically distributed. There's nobody so poor in the world who has no soil under his feet. Similarly, nobody's so poor that there's no sunshine over his head, especially in our part of the mountains. So down here, you see how the sun heats the building. Actually, a practical application of the chapter on heat in ninth grade. Convection, conduction, radiation. That's what these buildings use. With the greenhouse, you can see on the building a plastic clear film, and that makes the air heat. The air gets hot and goes through the top windows of the house and then circulates the cold air into the greenhouse, and there's a convection current. Similarly, conduction and radiation help to make these buildings stay plus 14 to plus 18 even when it is minus 15 outside. That's what you can do with engineering and physics and science. In your high school, you don't really call it engineering. You can do it with high school science. So solving problems with available resources and with creativity rather than just money. Actually, sometimes when you don't have money, you are better off using your mind. And in our case, that was the case. So we created with minimal resources and local resources a haven, a place where we can live happily without depending on a lot of cash. So here you see our students plowing the gardens with yaks and zoos. Yaks are animals, work animals, zoos also. And this is beautiful. We need not go all after technology, just because it is there. Tractors, why do we need them when you have animals that are like tractors and they don't take diesel fuel, which comes from Qatar or UAE? They eat grass available around, and their dung becomes food for the grass, and their waste is food for the food that we eat. So manure comes from this beautiful cycle of nature. Similarly, in the background, you see buildings that are warm in winter without any moving parts, electricity, or power bills. What more do you need in life? So you can live very simply and happily using natural resources. And in the process, you do not pollute the air, you do not harm others, and live happily. But now our challenge was, how do we take it? How do we take it to the outside world, from this school outside, to solve generally the people's problem? And sadly, if you can see my pictures, sadly, outside our school in the city of Leh, the path that development took was very different from what we were doing. So you can see the city was built like this, with concrete and cement moved over mountaintops in smoke belching trucks, polluting mountains, melting glaciers along the way. And they were built with cement and concrete, and you can see that roofs of the houses are tin roofs, which is a copy of what is done in Kashmir, where it snows a lot. We hardly have any snow, and yet tin roofs that are very cold, not insulated. And therefore, what happens then when you have a misplaced development without consideration for local resources and local solutions? Then this kind of city gets built up, which is heated like this. This is a picture of the Leh city in winter. You can see how smoky, polluted, unbreathable the air is, because people have money to buy more fuel nowadays, so they burn more, twice, for making up for the wrong design and wrong materials like cement concrete, very conductive, metal roofs, very conductive in -20. Sometimes engineering is misplaced and misdirected and misused, and you end up with a hell like this, very, very polluted, bad for your pocket, bad for your lungs, and bad for other living beings like birds, insects, suffer for no fault of theirs. So we said we should have solutions for the outside world also. But how do you go and build for them, houses that are solar heated, clean and pure, and no pollution, no drain to your pocket or economic drain? So we said the solution could be entrepreneurship, the vehicle of entrepreneurs, to be used so as to take the technology to the people outside. So we trained some of our former students into solar builders, to take our solution to the people outside, again with the empathy to solve their problems of cold winters and polluted environment. We said we should use that opportunity to give also livelihoods to our students. So that way, several companies, actually several solar building companies, arose from this effort. And now the challenge to us, now here I will share you how solution can be very complex. It's not just the technology of how to use the sun to heat a building. No, it is also how to take the solution to the masses, entrepreneurship. Then again, now this is something very interesting I want to share with you today, that changing things is more complex and multi-dimensional than just one technology from the laboratory. So we had all the technology. We had how to build great houses with earth or soil, solar energy. But then mud houses are traditional in Ladakh. Ancient buildings were built with mud. Our ancestors built with mud. And yet today's people, not only in Ladakh, all over India, consider mud buildings as something inferior, something poor people's, building. So how do you counter that stigma? So what I saw was that in places like Nepal, I had seen that when the government was so generous to give poor people mud buildings under the Janta Awas Yojana, poor people saw it as an insult, and they would throw the mud building and not accept it because they don't want to identify being poor. So this is something I learned also from the Tata Nano experience. Here's some psychology behind marketing solutions. So when you have solutions for change, you have to be able to market them nicely also. So you will remember that there was a lot of hype about the Tata Nano, and then it didn't become much. I learned from this experience that there was a big problem in the marketing strategy. You might remember that it was presented or positioned as the world's cheapest car, right? Can you hear me and see me? Somebody say, okay, yes, you say, great. So you remember that Tata Nano was positioned as the world's cheapest car. In hindsight, I'm sure Tata realizes that that was a blunder, because cars are not just a vehicle to take you from point A to B. Cars are also a status symbol. Cars are also, expression of that I have arrived. Now, who would want to be seen in the world's cheapest car? So they want to be not identified as poor person only affording the world's cheapest car. And perhaps that was one of the reasons that even the poor people preferred second-hand versions of other cars than the world's poorest or cheapest car. So learning from this, we did a very interesting thing with the mud buildings. We knew that, like Nano, if we say this is the cheapest building in the world, even the poor will reject it. Of course, the rich will reject it, but even the poor who we wanted to help will reject it. So we said, let's not deal with the poor. We want to, but let's be patient and attack the rich, attack the upper end of the society, the high end of the society. And let's build buildings that are aspirational, that are symbolic of status, that you have arrived. So instead of building cheaper, smaller buildings for the poor, we started building high-end, rammed earth, luxury houses for some well-off people, the kind that is as good or better than those in California uh, and the Silicon Valley. I don't know if you know, in the US, in many parts, earth buildings are considered the ultimate luxury, and they are so expensive that one of my friends told me that the rich cannot afford it. Only the super rich can afford it. So we try to bring it into that bracket, as buildings that are not only like your Rolls Royce, but buildings that don't need any heating, no pollution, no bills to pay. And they clicked. Very soon our idea was to make it acceptable among the higher upper end of the society, and then very soon, of course, the poor will also want, because it will become aspirational. That was the idea. And these are earth buildings, but they are not beautiful. As you can see, they can be very beautiful, very classy. And I keep getting guests from Europe who say, I wish, I dream I had a house like this. So we gave earth buildings a class of aspirational standards. And then something very interesting happened. This is what I thought I would share with you, aspirational, engineering career people solving problems. But then solving problems is not a linear thing, too many dimensions. So here is what happened. Let me share with you this very interesting finding today. This is 2012, before we went on this strategy. Yeah? The house you see on the left looks like a cement house, doesn't it? But it is actually a mud house. It's actually a mud house. The owner of the house felt so inferior about his mud house that he would paint it, plaster it like a cement house to make it look like a cement house, because that they thought was aspirational, that they thought was, symbolized richness. So in 2012, it was common to plaster mud houses with cement and hide the identity of the mud building. 2014, we introduced this strategy of solving the problem by making it aspirational. Come 2018, and what you see looks like a mud building, but it is a cement building. The scenario changed so much that cement buildings thought it was aspirational to at least look mud like. And there are several cement buildings that paint and plaster themselves with mud to hide the cement identity, concrete identity, and show that they are also classy, even if they are cement inside. So from 2012 to 18, it's an interesting difference. Here's another, concrete building that poses like an earth building, which is very good. We think this is a great indicator of the change of spirit of what earth buildings can be. Now, you all may not know that half of India lives in mud buildings, half of our population, and 1/3 of the world's population lives in mud buildings, but they live in it feeling inferior, feeling compelled to do so. Let's make it a pride to be, to be aspirational. And we can, because this is a natural material that you can do. Now I'll quickly share, I think I don't have much time, but I thought I'll share with you a little bit about the world of ice after the world of earth and world of sun, a little bit of world of ice. You may have heard about the ice stupas, artificial glaciers, but today I'm not going to share about that much because it's very much on the internet. You can look up, there are many interesting videos. So I'll share about another aspect of ice, the fun part of ice. Ice is also known for making Ladakh colorful in winters. Now, how can you solve another challenge that we saw in gender equity and in making a very difficult cold place livable and enjoyable? Let's see how we try to use this problem solving attitude. Yeah. So, winters you would think in Ladakh would be horrible, cold, etc., etc., but actually no, winters are looked up to. Especially young people wait for winter, and the reason is ice hockey. Ice hockey is a sport that is very, very popular in Ladakh. And 15 years ago, I saw that it was like at its peak, very popular. The winters were colorful. People enjoyed winters because of the ice hockey season. But I noticed one thing missing. And that one thing missing was very serious for me. And that was women, girls. There were no girls playing on the ice. No ice hockey tournaments for girls. Only men. It was a totally male dominated sport, which means only men would look up to winter and enjoy winter. Women didn't think it was their place. And I started trying to find out why. And then soon I saw that part of the reason was that these ice fields, or ice rinks they are called, are made on lakes and reservoirs. Now, lakes and reservoirs are not centrally located, conveniently located for girls to go and come back in the evenings, transport and safety, etc., etc., made it such that girls wouldn't even come on the ice. So then I said, how about making ice rinks closer to where they live? But I was told that no, you can't do that. It's only possible on lakes and reservoirs. Now, at our school, the school of so-called failures, we made some experiments with science and engineering. Again, to our help came high school science and engineering. So we used some reflective colors like lime, some shading, some physics, and made an ice hockey rink. In fact, at that time, the biggest rink in maybe whole of India, open air rink, right outside the girls' hostel at our school, right outside the girls' hostel. So they could just jump out of bed and play ice hockey. And play they did. Very soon, they started playing inter-school tournaments, and soon we were able to register the tournament in the district or the hill council tournaments, and they started playing within Ladakh, and then national tournaments from this school where this sport started for women, with students who had failed in their exams and so on, started an interesting sport. And recent years, they have been representing India as the Indian national ice hockey team in tournaments around the world. So from just a little tweaking of physics and engineering, you could make winters colorful, not just for men, but also women. And today we have a women's international team for India. Of course, many of you may not know, and I don't blame you, because this country only knows cricket. Yes. You might hear more about them, but that's what it is. So, ice stupas is another form of ice. that solves water challenges, but I recommend that you look up on internet videos on this because we don't have time. What I want to say is that making artificial glaciers to store water from winter when it is in excess because there is no farming to summer using geometry, gravity, and nothing else. No moving parts, no machinery, no power bills, no pollution, just gravity and geometry. You'll find out more on videos. I won't reveal now. You can solve. But then you can solve partially the water challenges. But then we don't want to think of it as a great feat to boast about, because climate change, which is what is making water scarce in the mountains, it will continue. Even if we make these small, tiny solutions, climate change is happening more because of how the planet lives, how the big cities in the world live. The behavior and way of life in big cities is making our glaciers melt so that we'll soon become climate refugees. Sea levels are rising, so people around the coastal areas will also suffer. So therefore, more than these solutions, of late, we engineered another solution that is somewhat global so that we change the behavior of the people. And the but in this solution of ice stupas is a big but. Until people around the world learn to live simpler lives, not polluting, not wasteful, not mindless consumeristic lifestyles, we cannot solve with ice stupas or artificial glaciers or solar heated buildings. So last October on Gandhi Jayanti, we started a movement, a global movement called I Live Simply movement, urging people around the world to choose simpler lifestyles, behavior change, so that they can live and they can let others live. So as Gandhi said, live simply so that others may simply live. We say, please live simply in the big cities so that we in the mountains may simply live. So we started it in a fun way for young people to participate in a movement called I Live Simply by crowdfunding, not in money, but in pledges. It's a curious thing. You might go and look up on ilivesimply.org. You can contribute thousands of dollars. Even if you have nothing in your pocket, you can contribute lakhs of rupees for the planet by pledging lifestyle changes and converting that into dollars. Just look up. And that is what we think is a longer lasting solution, changing behavior of people, than our little solutions that I shared with you today. They are not really the best and the biggest. The solution is in your hands in the big cities, and you must cooperate so that everybody lives happily on this planet. So thank you. That was my part of my journey that I shared. I'll take some of your questions, and I'm told there are some questions. I know we had some problems and we must have run out of time. Can I take these questions, or do we have time? Please tell me. I'll start taking the first question, but if we have run out of time, tell me so. If you have to leave, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll take up the first question. Yeah, I'll look for your response. Did any innovation in the school curriculum inspire you as a child? Very interesting question. Yes, actually, in my school curriculum, I saw about evaporation. Evaporation, I remember, fascinated me, how it cools things when liquids evaporate, like matkas, pitchers. They give you cold or cool water in hot summers in Delhi. So that took my imagination, and I remember studying that further and creating an air conditioner. When I was in Delhi, in a school, I made an air conditioner that was again without any power, electricity, pollution, just by evaporative cooling, with a cotton canvas cubicle with water sprinkling on it and keeping it wet, and the evaporation of that water will cool the inside where I would study by 5 to 10 degrees compared to the outside. So that was one of the interesting things I did from my school curriculum. Another thing is, what are the sustainability projects that you have undertaken recently? Okay, in the same series of solving water challenges, of late we are working on greening the valleys, the deserts in Ladakh, using nothing but just the rainfall, the little rainfall that we have. It's an experiment to see if we can green the deserts without expensive canals or pumps and contraptions. We are trying to see how indigenous low water consuming plants can be grown by making the soil more absorbent, so that it retains the little water for months until next rainfall or snowfall comes. Something like that is what we are working on. People have asked me about new education policy. Well, I think there are many good things, some things to definitely debate, but a lot of very good things that actually are happening around the world, but we need to catch up in India. Those are already in there. For example, interdisciplinary rather than silos, credit systems so that you can change and subjects from discipline. Similarly, you have mother tongue. The biggest thing I really liked was the mother tongue in primary education. Now, this connects to the third question there. That's what hampers innovation in education. I think in India, one thing that is hampering innovation in a big way is the absence of mother tongue, the respect for mother tongue, because mother tongue is the language that you almost are born with. You start learning even before you're born. Imagine how skillful you would be with that tool. But unfortunately, in our country, when the child grows and is ready to go to school, we deprive it of that tool and hand over some new tools. And of course, they can't grasp everything as good as you can do in mother tongue. And because of that, we lose confidence, we lose originality, we lose the spirit of question, we lose even curiosity. And without these, how can you have innovation, originality, curiosity? These are all become a victim of foreign languages, alien languages that you don't have a grip over. So that, I think, is the biggest challenge. And this new education policy promises to make mother tongues of different regions the primary level medium of instruction. I understand that at higher levels you have to learn English and other languages, but we are talking about pre-primary and primary. I have released a video on English medium. You might as well watch that on YouTube. It's all about this aspect of the new education policy, where we can bring back India on the rail again with originality and curiosity of the children maintained, where schools do not make them feel small and broken. Okay, so I think I'll quickly touch the last question. What are your plans to take your style of education forward? Well, I don't plan to come to Assam or Tamil Nadu or Hyderabad to do the job there, but we would like to collaborate and partner with passionate individuals from these places. And to facilitate that, we are setting up an alternative university which does high-end research and development. And one of the things, there are many, this is about mountain regions, but one of the things in the School of Education we are looking forward to have is sharing of best practices among activists and among passionate individuals. So you would be welcome to join one of these courses, learn from our mistakes, and if there are any successes, and then make your place better. It's not my place to come to some other place, but it's very much your place to make it better. And if each part of India takes care of itself, then the nation will take care of itself. You don't have to do much. So that's what I would say. I think I should end it here. Thank you. I always say this is not the end, because the journey continues, the struggle continues, and definitely this is not. Thank you very much for being with me despite all the challenges, but that only shows you that challenges are a part of life, and particularly in remote areas of our country, you have challenges, and to solve them is the way to go rather than moan about them. Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you. Hope you enjoyed the session. Do let me know later. Thank you. Thank you. Hello. Yes, I did. Okay.